Good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN Weekly for Saturday, March 27th, 2021. And our top story today, why pre-planning your funeral makes sense. Well, joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Eliza Feller. She's Director of Advanced Planning for Saul Levinson Brothers Funeral Home. Eliza, it's great to see you again. Thanks so much for joining us on the program.
It's good to be here. Always nice to have a conversation about important topics.
Absolutely. It's been a very busy week here on the network. We talked earlier on, and we'll recap some of this as part of our show, and later on, we had a great conversation about treating brain-related diseases. Then we went to the great wealth transfer and then estate planning. And I immediately thought of you, not for all the above, but you know, death is a natural part of life. It's inevitable. And I wanted to get your sense about advanced planning and you know, what that means in terms of preparing for when your death comes, when that time comes. So why don't you weigh in? I'll be quiet. You weigh in and tell us a little bit more about advanced planning and why we should be thinking about it.
Sure. Well, the estate planning aspect absolutely just ties straight into that, which is a lot of times when people are doing estate planning and retirement planning, they're thinking a lot about having the funds available for the rest of their life, but they don't necessarily consider that last part of it. And pre-planning allows you to not only financially plan for what exactly it is that you want for your end-of-life service, it also makes sure that your surviving family doesn't have that financial obligation put on them. So it's just a smart thing to do as part of that whole process.
And in terms of the actual process to do advanced planning, I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but is it a set of documents that you would insert in the estate planning, and then separately you can also pre-fund this, right? So you can buy, I guess it's an insurance vehicle of some type, or you tell me, you know. Okay. So one, is it a document that you insert or documents that you insert in your estate plan?
It is all of the above and more, which is the documents are extremely important, but as important as they are to have as part of your estate plan, it is probably even more important that if you have chosen a specific funeral home, which is important in the process of finding out what those costs are going to be for the services you wish to have, that the funeral home has that information available. If not, that a family member has that information where they can access it easily. We've spoken before about the logistical issues with the timing of things like reading a will or having access to a safe deposit box and how that can impact the funeral or, you know, celebration of life, whatever it is that you plan on. So having those easily accessible at the time is very important. Prepaying is a major component. There are a lot of ways to prepay. Some of it depends on what state you're in. Some of it depends on the funeral home and which vehicle they choose to put those funds in. There can be a lot of flexibility. If you're living in one place and you prepay there, and the funds can often be transferred to another funeral home. But again, it's a sum of money. Funerals, just like any other life cycle event, it's not a small amount of money. And for your family, when they are grieving, when they are scrambling to get people into town, when they are trying to go through an apartment or a condo or an entire house and deal with all those other aspects of someone's estate, for them to not have to worry about coming up with this large sum of money is very important.
Yeah, and I've been involved with some of the planning. I've not been involved yet as a participant. We'll push that off a little bit, but I've been involved with the planning. There's a lot of details, as you mentioned, from selection of the casket to what type of vault, to the location of the burial, right? Or whether someone wants to be cremated. There are all these different, I mean, there are so many different permutations of what someone wants. it really makes a lot of sense to think about this. And could you remind our audience, when's a good time? Look, I mean, we all don't want to be aware that at some point we're not going to be here anymore. But when's a good time to kind of begin this conversation? Is it upon getting married? Is it upon having children? When do people generally begin that advanced planning process in your mind?
Well, the answer is now. I will always say the answer is now. Getting married, it's an important time to start having the conversations about what you want that to look like. Nobody at that time of their life wants to think about it, but it is inevitable, and we don't always know when something's going to happen. So knowing what you want and your loved one being aware, certainly as you move toward a lot of people in their 50s, we'll start this process. It is a very good time because you are moving toward that retirement planning or already well into serious thought about your retirement planning at that point. It is important to have honest and open conversations, and also to speak with a funeral director to have all the information you need. A lot of people say to us, well, they just need to pick a casket. It is so much more than that. A lot of people say, well, I don't care what they do with me. Except that puts a great burden on your family because they care. So a lot of the advanced planning process is not just what you want for yourself, but also what would bring the most comfort to your surviving family.
Eliza, when you prepay for a funeral, do you do it can you make like you make 401k contributions, $100 every month, and say that, you're going to know because you've selected the funeral home, you're going to know that it is $25,000, $30,000, whatever to do a funeral. Do you start just like you would a 529 or a 401k, making small contributions over time, and the earlier the better? Is that a good rule of thumb, or do you need to make larger contributions because the timeline, if you start in your 50s, maybe you only have 20 years of solid work left before you retire?
Yep. So just as with everything else, certainly the more that you're able to pay at once, the more that works in your favor. Every funeral home has different payment options. Most people do, if it's possible, most people do pay all at once if they can. Obviously, if people are paying for 2 funerals at the same time, or for whatever financial reason they can't, they may divide it up into larger chunks. Or sometimes if people have a certain amount of money, they can pay over time. Now, I do recommend starting to do the payments as soon as possible. Most funeral homes have a way that when you prepay, they will lock in their charges so that no matter how much the cost of the funeral goes up, they will keep what growth is earned toward the cost of the funeral to help offset that difference. But they will not come back to your family and ask for more money toward those items. If, let's say, you have a $10,000 funeral and it costs $20,000 at the time, but in that vehicle, maybe there's $18,000 set aside. So they would not come back to your family and ask for that $2,000 difference. So certainly sooner is better in that regard.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. While I have you here, Eliza, things are starting to open up back around the country. I want to get your sense. We're now a year past the year anniversary of the pandemic. How have you started having? Has Saul Levinson Brothers started and the state of Maryland started having open funerals? Has that process changed, or are you still doing online funerals at this point?
We have, for most of the past year, had an in-person but open to the outside air chapel set up. Some funeral homes have continued to do very limited, very small indoor services. Most organizations, religious organizations, etc., are moving toward using those indoor spaces again, we're certainly evaluating that and taking steps toward that being able to happen. And it requires a lot of evaluation of variables and making sure that the community is safe, that our staff is safe, make sure the clergy is comfortable. But that is a direction that I think everybody is headed at this point.
Yeah. Well, Eliza Feller, it is a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning, and we look forward to having you back again very soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Eliza. Great to see you. Thanks for sharing your perspective. And when we come back, we'll take a look at some of our best segments for the week. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN Weekly. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. On Monday, I sat down with McGovern Institute's Omar Abadea and Jonathan Gutenberg to discuss treating brain-related diseases. Let's take a look.
It's really an exciting time in biotechnology because things are moving so quickly. And it's good that they are because, there's obviously a really pressing need, especially with COVID. But you kind of see two things. One is that we talk about these molecular medicines like they could be far off, but there are already companies, actually many, in the Cambridge area, that are applying this principle of actually changing a patient's DNA to be able to treat certain diseases. For example, CRISPR Therapeutics, which is right down the block from us, actually, they've already treated a patient with sickle cell anemia and been able to cure the disease by correcting just a single letter in her genome. And so it's going to be really amazing to see, now there's probably like 5 or 6 companies in the, just within a mile radius of us doing new genetic therapies. In addition, there are other things. You talked about the COVID pandemic. So Omar and I are co-founders, along with a couple other professors, of a company called Sherlock Biosciences. And Sherlock actually uses some of the CRISPR technologies we've been developing in the lab to do diagnostics. So they actually have a product for using the CRISPR proteins and their programmable nature to actually detect the presence of the SARS-CoV-2 genome. So you can see that there are applications across therapeutics and diagnostics and basic research of these technologies.
Yeah, I mean, I think in our space, therapeutics are definitely the shinier, more exciting thing that scientists want to work on, because it's you make a drug and that can save hundreds of thousands of people, whereas diagnostics, although they are incredibly important in the medical sort of pipeline, they're not as direct in saving lives. And I think we've been working on CRISPR diagnostics for many years, probably since 2016 or so. And as we started our new lab, we were starting to lean more towards therapeutics, because we had started this company and it was taking a lot of our original papers and findings to try to make an actual product. But what happened is back in January of 2020, when this pandemic was kind of starting to take off in Asia, we started getting a lot of emails, and our colleagues were also getting a lot of emails from people in China saying it would be great if we could help do something with our CRISPR diagnostic work to try to make easy, cheap testing available, because at that time people really were not testing for the virus. And so we ended up spinning up a lot of our CRISPR diagnostic work again in our lab, and we're collaborating with Feng Zhang as well, our PhD advisor across the street, to try to make this happen. And we had a team of probably 6 or 7 people working on this to make a COVID test. We were able to put out white papers online to help ship kits around the world. We published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine on this testing over like hundreds of clinical patients. And we've even got a device firm to try to help us make a sort of miniature Apple HomePod looking device that can run the chemistry, so someone could swab themselves and then test. And we're currently trying to get that through the FDA process to get that to the finish line. It's taken a little bit longer to get the whole product to come together, but I think it's been very special to try to apply our skills towards something so pressing for human society. And I think it's also great that it brings diagnostics again to the forefront, because the biggest way to fight a virus in a pandemic is actually just to rapidly test and isolate people, so you stop the spread, and that can actually save a lot of lives compared to just the drugs or the antibody therapies. I think it's been a fun process getting back in the diagnostic game, and we're hoping we can make a difference soon with our product.
The great thing about doing research these days is that we can draw from advances not only in biology and biotechnology, but across the board. So it's really amazing to see how these kind of really cutting edge concepts of AI, machine learning, can start to cross-pollinate. And for example, Google, an Alphabet subsidiary, DeepMind, they had a actual machine learning program that could predict the fold of proteins, and it actually did amazingly well. And so it's really neat to see how these advances in other domains can come through and allow us to do really crazy stuff. We have robots in the lab that can help us out to do assays. We can analyze large amounts of data. So yeah, it's great to see all these things come together to really accelerate the pace and development of different cures and diagnostics.
Well, there's more than 5,000 genetic diseases where you can point to a specific mutation or genetic change and say, hey, like if we could correct that, you would help these patients. And I think, a lot of our goal is to try to treat all of those diseases. So until, that's done, I don't think our job really is done. And a lot of those diseases require new tools. You need ways to target the cells that are actually involved. Once you make a gene editing tool, it's not the only step. Like if it's involved in a very specialized cell type somewhere deep in the lung tissue, you have to be able to get your tool to that cell. So there's a lot of delivery questions there as well. And so there's all these tools on the pipeline of building a gene therapy that I think, we're looking at developing and working on for the next 10 to 20 years. And it's going to take a long time for, I think, our field and developers to actually address all of these different diseases. And beyond that, I think, we want to develop tools to identify what every cell in the human body does, right? We're made up of, trillions on trillions of cells, and we're just starting to understand that each cell in some ways is uniquely different from other cells through single cell sort of sequencing technologies and whatnot. We want to make tools to better map those cells, map which of those cells at a very high resolution are involved in different diseases, and continue pushing our understanding of how to treat every biomedical disease. Because I'll tell you, even though we can point to the causes of these 5,000 genetic diseases, there's many more that still have complex underlying causes that are not mapped. So for example, like, the autism spectrum, right? There isn't like one gene and one mutation that causes autism, right? It's very complex. People are still trying to understand how you get the characteristics you witness in autistic people from the underlying genetic variants, and that's just an example of one complex disease, but there's many more, and so there's still a lot of biology to understand.
Omar, I think we should really be grateful that we can work on technologies that have the ability to, have an impact on society in this form. I mean, all we, given our skill set, it's really our duty to try to develop these things. And yeah, I mean, it's really, I think, what gets us out of bed every morning. It allows us to, science, you have to be at the bench a long time. And as Omar said, there's a lot of failures, but it's nice to always remember that, kind of at the end of the day, really what you're fighting for, which is the ability to take a lot of this suffering of patients and, fix that and cure that. So yeah, I think that we're really lucky in that respect that we get to be able to do this.
And on Friday, I sat down with estate planning attorney Sabrina Winters to learn why everyone needs an estate plan. Let's take a look.
So estate planning, I like to actually compare it to life insurance, homeowners insurance, and car insurance. Those things protect the what if. What if I have a flood? What if I have a car accident? Well, estate planning is very similar to insurance, but in addition to protecting the what if, it protects the when. When you pass away, what will happen? So a lot of people think, well, it's just a will or a trust that I need and I'm done, but it's not. It's all of those other documents. It's who's going to manage your medical decisions if you can't do it. What about end of life planning? Or what about who's going to manage your assets? It's all of those documents that really encompasses estate planning. Everybody has different issues, fears, and concerns, and those change as we change life stages. As we get older, as we have more kids, we become empty nesters. We lose spouses. Every stage has to be concerned with a variety of different things. And that's why estate planning is more of an evolving estate plan. It's not, I've done it and I've forgotten about it. Anything could happen to anybody walking out of the house, walking to the office, or just being in the grocery store. Death happens to everybody, and so does illness. So everybody really needs to consider that, regardless of what stage, regardless of their health, and certainly regardless of what their estate value is. Initially in North Carolina, as long as you are 18 or older, you can get these documents done, a healthcare power of attorney and a financial power of attorney, those kinds of documents. And of course, a will. They're going to start working, when they're in college and they have a checking account. Parents lose the right to control anything their kids have when they're 18. So it's really important when you send them off to college that they've got these documents in place. Certainly when you get married, when you have kids, when you have a divorce, anybody that has a life needs to get these done. And it's important to remember too, as well, that you can't get these documents done if you lose capacity. So if you have a car accident tomorrow and you're disabled mentally, you may not be able to put these in writing anymore. And then your family is forced to do a guardianship at the court to figure out who's going to manage your affairs every day for your assets, as well as your medical decisions. And that's certainly not something you want family to have to go through. And on the opposite end, if you don't have a will or a trust in place, your state, like North Carolina, likely has a statute that says, well, you didn't have a will, you didn't have a trust. Here's who we say gets your stuff. Here's how they will get it. And your state is not going to care about how money manageable your children are, or how spendthrift your spouse may be, or if you have a disabled beneficiary. They don't care about any of that. So you need to make sure that you're making the decisions in writing. Don't leave it up to your state. So on my initial calls, I work fairly differently than some other attorneys. I'm really trying to get to know my clients on our first meeting. I want to know, what are you afraid of? What made you pick up the phone and call somebody like me to help you? Or why did you ask for a referral? Fears, concerns, issues, those are all the things I'm trying to understand from my clients from the moment that we're talking together. If they're married, I'm speaking to both of them. If they are single or widowed, of course, I'm speaking to only one of them. Based on their fears and their concerns and their ultimate goals, that's how I suggest the plan that's right for them. It's not what I would have done for them. It's not what somebody told them that they should do. It's all based on, here are your fears and concerns, and this is the plan that's going to make those better. This is what's going to give you peace of mind and make life easier for your family, either during a time of your illness or certainly after you pass away, and how they're settling the estate. And all of my clients, they don't have to choose their documents. They will always have a comprehensive plan, which in my mind is the only way to help any estate planning client. A la carting is bad, good for restaurants, good for ordering online, not good for estate planning clients. You could get sick before you pass away. And because the attorney only gave you a will, now your family's going to court because there isn't anybody allowed that can make those medical decisions for you. So my clients get a plan: healthcare power, living will, financial power of attorney, just to name a few of the advanced care directives that come with a properly drafted estate plan. So I see a lot of parents forget to update their plans after they've had more children. So the one plan is only taking care of their firstborn. When you get a divorce, you absolutely have to change your will and your other documents. I'm going to assume that when you are divorced, there is probably a reason you don't want your ex to be making medical decisions for you and or helping you as your agent on your financial power of attorney. So those are important as you are in the middle of separation to get those updated, as long as your attorney's putting the right language in there. A divorce, somebody has passed away, even if it's not your spouse, but it could be a beneficiary. You may want to revisit how things are getting distributed. Maybe a remarriage of one of your children, and you are not a big fan of the new spouse. There are things that you can consider adding or amending in your will or your trust to alleviate those concerns for that new in-law that you don't care for too much. And that happens a lot.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN Weekly. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, then drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more all in one place, check out our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, and of course, our website. We're back again tomorrow for BRN Sunday. I'll be joined by members of the media, academia, and financial services as we analyze all the news and information this week. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.